while dining at a fancy restaurant. I found myself facing an unexpected and uncomfortable confrontation from my mother-in-law. As we settled at the table, she shot me a dismissive glance, a smirk playing on her lips as she waved her hand dismissively in my direction. The contempt in her gesture ignited a simmering frustration within me, but I fought to maintain my composure. "Are you asking me to leave?" I managed to ask, my voice quaking with barely suppressed anger. Just as I was about to walk out, she cut in sharply. "Wait a minute," she interjected, her tone haughty and commanding. "If you walk out now, who's going to settle the bill? Hand over the money." Despite the tension, I met her gaze with a calm smile. "Why should I pay for someone I barely know? I'm Emma, 31 years old, and I work in an office. My husband, James, is the same age, and for the most part, we share a harmonious life. However, the constant strain in our relationship stems from his mother's intrusive and controlling behavior. Living nearby, she often drops by unannounced, ready to criticize everything from my cooking, claiming it's not good enough for her son, to the way I run our household, labeling me incompetent. Despite knowing I work full-time, she never hesitates to chastise me for not keeping a pristine home, especially during her evening visits. What's even more frustrating is that she presents a different persona to James, making it hard for him to recognize the truth of her behavior toward me. He remains oblivious to her harshness, convinced that her actions are perfectly acceptable since he hasn't witnessed her cruelty firsthand. The situation has escalated to the point where she now has a key to our house, courtesy of James, further eroding the boundaries I desperately want to maintain. This ongoing ordeal challenges me to find a way to convey the reality of her behavior to James while establishing the boundaries I so desperately need. My mother-in-law regularly uses the key James gave her to invade our home at will, often complaining about my cooking and cleaning. She even speaks poorly of me to our neighbors. It feels like it's one issue after another with her. I've repeatedly voiced to James my wish for us to move farther away from my in-laws, but he's been so focused on his big project at work that he hasn't taken my concerns seriously. Then, a fortunate turn of events occurred. My husband received a promotion, a reward for his successful project, which also brought an increase in our income. With this newfound financial stability, he began considering the possibility of starting a family. I was on board but insisted that if we were going to raise children, we needed a more child-friendly environment. The current area lacked adequate play spaces and daycare facilities. After much discussion, James finally agreed that moving was the best choice. This decision brought me more joy than even his promotion. However, my happiness was short-lived. The very next day, my mother-in-law showed up unannounced, as she often did, and my initial irritation flared up as I braced myself for another round of her criticisms. But this time felt different. She was bubbling with excitement, eager to celebrate James's promotion by taking him to a lavish restaurant known for its exquisite cuisine and impeccable service. "That sounds nice. Good for you," I replied, striving to keep my tone polite. "You're still not very friendly," she noted, her voice carrying a hint of disappointment. "Anyway, I want you to come with us. Please join us." "I'll see if I can, but it might not work out," I said, attempting to keep my options open without outright committing. "Don't say that. We really want you there," she insisted, dismissing my hesitance entirely. It was puzzling to see her so eager for my company, especially after she had previously excluded me from family outings. Her sudden insistence left me cautiously optimistic, but something felt off. Later, when I spoke with James, he informed me that he had already agreed to accompany her and that she had taken the initiative to book the restaurant for us. "You're excited about this, right, Emma?" he asked, his tone hopeful. I couldn't hide my feelings. "Sorry, but I'm not looking forward to it. I'm concerned about the costs at such an upscale place. I'd rather you just tell them I'm busy and enjoy the evening without me," I replied, hoping to sidestep the evening altogether. "Why are you being so negative? It's not just us. My brothers and their wives will be there too. It wouldn't be right for you to miss out on celebrating with the whole family," he urged, clearly enthusiastic about the gathering and keen for my presence. But his excitement felt dismissive of my concerns, as if he were prioritizing his mother's wishes over mine. I devised a backup plan. I had purchased an online voice recorder to discreetly capture any unkind remarks she might make during the celebration. If she acted poorly, I could play it back for James. If he still sided with her after that, it might be time to reconsider our marriage. While this plan offered a sliver of relief, the thought of facing my mother-in-law at the restaurant filled me with dread, prompting me to sigh repeatedly. I wasn't very familiar with James's brothers. I had only met them briefly during our wedding, and I barely knew their wives. Having exchanged only polite hellos, were already seated when we arrived at the restaurant. A waiter guided us to a large room where my mother-in-law, one of my husband's brothers, his wife, and another brother with his wife were already gathered. The table was elegantly set with fancy dishes, creating an atmosphere for what was meant to be a celebratory dinner. Confusion set in when James noticed there was only one seat left at the table. He looked puzzled, questioning whether there had been a mix-up. "Did the waiter mess up? I'll go check," he said before stepping out of the room. The moment he left, the others began to eat. Then, my mother-in-law stood up, glaring at me with a harsh expression. "There's no seat for you. Why would I invite someone who just married into our family to our celebration? So here's your choice. Do you want to be part of our family, or leave and never come back? What's it going to be?" Without hesitation, I replied firmly, "No, I'm leaving." My mother-in-law looked momentarily taken aback, as if she had expected me to plead for her acceptance. But she quickly issued another challenge. "Listen, if you pay for everyone's meal here, I'll accept you as part of James's family. You must be upset about being treated like a stranger, so pay up and become family." I stood my ground. "I told you, I'm leaving. Why should I pay for someone else's family's meal?" I began to walk away, but she slammed her hand on the table, her voice rising. "Don't you understand? I'm trying to make you part of the family. Are you okay with being the stranger? Pay up." "No, I'm fine being a stranger, and since I'm a stranger, I'm definitely not paying for your meal. Goodbye." I walked briskly toward the exit, and although my mother-in-law tried to catch up to me, I was already out the door by the time she reached the entrance of the room. Once home, I contemplated sending an email to James about the incident when he returned within 15 minutes. The reservation was correct, and my mom was causing a scene, he explained, having learned the truth from his brother. "I heard everything. I'm sorry you had to go through that." "You came back quickly," I said, relieved yet still shaken by the events. "It seemed like she would have caused a scene whether I stayed or left," he replied, his tone filled with regret. "How could I sit with them after they insulted my wife?" His swift return and understanding of the situation offered me some reassurance. This confrontation appeared to have a ripple effect. It seemed to spark a realization among my husband's brothers' wives, who had previously felt they had to silently endure such treatment. Witnessing my stand against my mother-in-law's demeaning attitude seemed to inspire them to assert themselves as well. Soon after, they too left the restaurant, followed promptly by their husbands. Predictably, my mother-in-law didn't take this well. Within hours, my phone began to ring incessantly with her calls. Despite my attempts to ignore them, the constant ringing forced me to block her number. However, the quiet was short-lived. I soon received a call from an unknown number, and the voice on the other end introduced himself as a police officer from a nearby station. "Hi, sorry for calling so late. Is this Emma's phone?" the officer asked. He explained that after everyone had left the restaurant, my mother-in-law attempted to dine alone and insisted that I should pay the bill. when the restaurant staff refused her request to defer payment, assuming I wouldn't return after leaving in anger. She found herself in a predicament. The restaurant suggested she pay with a card, but she had neither a credit card nor enough cash to cover the cost of everyone's meals. She tried reaching out to other family members for help, but no one responded. Her frustration escalated quickly. She began yelling, blaming me for the situation, and in her rage, started destroying the restaurant's property, including expensive vases and flower pots. This commotion led the staff to call the police. Despite the officers' attempts to soothe her, she maintained her innocence and continued her tirade. Now, the restaurant faced not only an unpaid bill but also the aftermath of her outburst. They requested someone to take her home. Feeling somewhat responsible after hearing the officer's account, my husband and I reluctantly headed back to the restaurant. Upon our arrival, we found the police still trying to calm my mother-in-law. She had her arms crossed, and upon seeing me, she erupted. "You're useless. This happened because you didn't pay the bill. It's only right to help your mother, isn't it? Pay up now." I was stunned that she would make such threatening remarks in front of law enforcement. The officer informed us that if no one was willing to take her home, they would have to detain her for causing a disturbance and damaging property. The situation had spiraled far beyond a simple family disagreement, highlighting the severe consequences of her unchecked behavior. Faced with the prospect of the police either driving her to her in-laws' house or arresting her for not settling the restaurant bill, my response was firm: take her away, arrest her or whatever. Just make her take responsibility. My mother-in-law looked at me in disbelief. "How can you say something so heartless? I can't believe it. Just pay the bill. It's not good to have a family member arrested," she pleaded. "I don't care. I'm not family, and I don't want to be around someone who acts crazy and causes trouble," I retorted, ready to leave the restaurant and let the authorities handle the situation. My husband, who had remained silent until now, gave me a stern look. "I know what happened to Emma was wrong, but is it worth getting arrested over?" he asked. "That's not the point," I replied, exasperated. "She's in trouble because she didn't pay the bill and caused a scene. It has nothing to do with me. Are you saying it's my fault for not paying for 5 people's meals, even though I didn't eat?" My husband didn't respond but walked past me to speak with the police and restaurant staff. I knew what he was about to do, and in a last attempt to assert my stance, I called out to him, "If you pay for her meal and bail her out, we're getting divorced. Think about that." However, he continued without a word, taking out his wallet. Defeated, I sighed and left the restaurant. I walked home, packed my things, and prepared to leave. Just before the day ended, my husband returned, looking worn out. "Mom's not getting arrested. It turns out she was wrong." The restaurant agreed to forgive her if I came back and promised she wouldn't return. I didn't have enough money, so I called my brothers for help. He recounted, trying to explain his actions. I remained unmoved as he continued to speak, not reacting much to his words. He approached me, noticing the bags I was packing. "What's with the bags?" he asked, bewildered. "I'm getting ready to leave because we're getting divorced. I told you if you took her side, we'd get divorced. You can't pretend you didn't hear me," I said firmly as he watched me pack in surprise. Then he raised his voice. "What's going on today? You've been acting weird all day. I know Mom did something bad, but why do we have to get divorced? I already told you I'm being mistreated, and even when you see proof and hear others talk about it, you still choose your almost arrested mom over me. Is it weird that I want to divorce someone like that?" "I've had enough," I replied, exhausted from having to defend my decision yet again. My husband continued to speak, his voice filled with confusion and distress, not fully grasping the depth of the rift that had formed between us. Resolute in my decision to move on from this tumultuous relationship, I swiftly prepared to leave and obtain the necessary paperwork for a divorce. The very next morning, I signed the divorce papers. My husband was reluctant to end our marriage, but faced with the prospect of legal action, he too signed the papers. I submitted them without delay, finally ready to embrace my independence. Soon after our separation, my husband moved out and returned to his parents' home. Having relied on me for most household chores, he struggled to keep his living space tidy. Frustrated by the disarray, he decided to cancel the apartment lease and fully move back in with his parents. His brothers followed suit when he reached out to them for financial assistance to repay the restaurant bill. This ignited significant conflicts with their wives, who protested, arguing they shouldn't have to pay for a debacle they hadn't caused. Nevertheless, the brothers, siding with their mother, used their own money to help without consulting their spouses. This only deepened the rift, leading to accusations of being unreasonable and fears of legal consequences. The brothers' dismissive attitude toward their wives quickly deteriorated their marriages. Facing similar disputes, they too returned to their parents' home, lamenting their reluctance to manage their households. This situation turned my mother-in-law and her sons into the talk of the neighborhood. Rumors spread that the brothers had been abandoned by their wives. My mother-in-law labeled such talk as nonsense and attempted to portray us as ungrateful and undutiful wives. The estranged husbands echoed her sentiments, smugly blaming the failed marriages on their wives, convinced that divorcing was the right choice. Fortunately, I had maintained strong relationships with my neighbors, who saw through these narratives. My mother-in-law gained an unfavorable reputation for her poor parenting, as she had failed to instill proper values or independence in her sons. The husbands, on the other hand, were now seen as mama's boys, notorious for their unwavering support of their mothers over their spouses. This entire saga highlighted the underlying issues within the family and reinforced the community's perception of the true dynamics at play. Despite my exasperated mother-in-law and the husband's attempts to reconnect, I had already changed my contact details and relocated to a new area, effectively disappearing from their radar. They likely continued to grumble about losing contact, but for me, the absence of my mother-in-law's stressful presence was a tremendous relief. In this new chapter of my life, making new friends has been incredibly transformative. During the process of my divorce, I forged strong bonds with the ex-wives of my husband's brothers. United by our mutual frustrations with the matriarch of their family, we found solace and camaraderie in each other's company. Now, we frequently spend time together, enjoying meals out, shopping, and simply relaxing on weekends. Interestingly, I might owe a nod of gratitude to my ex-husband for inadvertently introducing me to such wonderful people. It feels liberating to be free to pursue our interests without interference. The simplicity of this newfound freedom is refreshing. I can now live my life on my own terms, far removed from the negative influence of people like my former mother-in-law. I'm immensely thankful for these friendships. If not for this supportive group, I might still be navigating solitude. They've brought joy and companionship into my life, and I'm hopeful that our bonds will last a lifetime.